Okay, this video is a follow-up on the introduction to tapping video. So if you haven't already watched that one, please go back and check it out because it will give you an introduction to a lot of what I'm going to be discussing in greater detail in this video now. And also, if you have not downloaded the tapping quick start document from my website, please do that because we are going to be using a page from that document in this video. That document, or the page that we're going to be focusing on here, is actually called the tapping cheat sheet. And this is a resource that I developed over the course of the past 16 years that I've been using tapping in my own personal life as well as in my work with my patients. And I have found personally that it just makes tapping so much more effective a tool for me, really enables me to mine my difficult emotions and challenging circumstances for data that helps me to understand myself better, make better decisions, and just generally lead a life that is happier and more effective. And so I hope you'll download that document and follow along with me in this video. So I think the best way for me to explain to you how to use the tapping cheat sheet is actually to just walk you through an issue that I tapped through myself here a few weeks ago. I'm going to give you kind of a transparent look into my own life in order to just sort of demonstrate how tapping can be used to really not just diffuse the intensity and the discomfort associated with unpleasant emotions, but actually enable you to learn from those emotions and get insight from those emotions and use challenging circumstances and feelings as a springboard into greater understanding of yourself. So never like to have videos be all about me, but we're going to just walk you through what I did with this tapping a few weeks ago so you can understand how this tool works. And hopefully it'll be an illustration that you can generalize to your own life. Okay? So go ahead, and if you haven't already done so, download that document, the tapping cheat sheet, from my website. Again, linked below this video. So first step, this document has numbered steps on it, so you know how to go about this. So the first step is actually just going to be to kind of jot down the details of what's going on with you as though you were summarizing the issue for a friend. And so in this instance, this situation took place in New Year's weekend this past year. And what I jotted in this number one section was, it's New Year's weekend and everyone else is relaxing while I'm stuck having to sort receipts and finish up bookkeeping for the year. I'm having a hard time staying focused and motivated, and the chore is dragging on forever. The longer I work, the more silly mistakes that I make, and my husband and my kids, or my husband is napping on the couch and my kids are watching TV. And so basically this is just a summary of if somebody were to call me up on the phone and say, "Hey, Kristen, how are you?" And I really wanted to give them an honest answer to that question, and sort of this is what I would say. And so you just want to jot down kind of the gist of the situation that you're dealing with to start with in this number one section. And then moving on from there, you're going to look at the list of negative emotions or unpleasant emotions. And in the tapping quick start document, I've got a list of dozens and dozens of unpleasant emotions. And the reason I've gone to the trouble of making that huge list of emotions is because I have found that it makes a huge difference in my ability to kind of sort through and learn from my feelings if I can describe to myself really specifically what I am feeling and give really specific words to the way that I'm feeling. And we actually know scientifically that by translating our emotions into language, by translating our emotions into giving words to our emotions, that we're actually able to shift out of a part of the brain that is very sort of primitive and, just strictly driven by kind of emotional factors, move from that state into a more rational place where we're actually able to process feelings and work through them. So I looked through that list of emotions and I just picked out a few that jumped out at me as good descriptions of how I was feeling. And I noted them down here under number 2. So I was feeling resentful, bitter, and frustrated. And then I'm going to hop over to number 3, and I'm going to start to develop a setup statement. So I'm going to take what I've written in that paragraph under number 1 and try and boil it down to just a few words. And then I'm going to take a couple of the emotions from step 2 and put it in this setup phrase as well. So my setup phrase is going to be, even though it's a holiday and I'm doing bookkeeping chores and I feel bitter and resentful. And then I'm going to follow that along with either an affirmation that I've chosen from the list of alternative affirmations in the Tapping Quick Start, or just the generic, always reliable, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. So all in all, so my whole setup statement is going to be, even though it's a holiday and I'm doing chores and I feel bitter and resentful, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. So that's my setup statement. And so then from there, I'm just going to take a second and to kind of breathe into my emotions. I'm going to pause, just focus on what's going on in my body. I'm going to actually make a point to sort of amplify my emotions if I can. I find that making sure that I'm breathing deeply helps with this process. Sometimes I even visualize my breath as sort of like a bellows that is blowing on those emotions, making them bigger and bigger so that I can feel them very clearly. And you can do this with confidence because you know that you've got a tool that's going to enable you to diffuse the intensity of those feelings here really quickly when you start tapping. And so after I've taken a few minutes, breathed into my feelings, focused on my feelings, tuned into exactly what's going on, I'm going to assign a SUDS score to those feelings. So SUDS, again, stands for subjective units of distress. And so in this instance, I'm going to say that my SUDS score starting out is a 7. I'm pretty annoyed and frustrated and, like I say, bitter, resentful about this situation to start with. And so then let's go ahead and just tap through this situation, and I'll show you how I use this cheat sheet to proceed with this procedure. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take my glasses off because that enables me to tap better. I'm also going to take off my bracelets here. And so I'm going to say my setup statement while tapping on my karate chop point, and I'm going to do that 3 times. So even though it's a holiday and I'm stuck doing bookkeeping chores and I feel bitter and resentful, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Even though it's a holiday and I'm doing chores and I feel bitter and resentful, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Even though it's a holiday and I'm stuck here doing bookkeeping chores and I feel so bitter and so resentful about that, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Okay, and so now I'm just going to tap through all the points on my face and my body while I'm just venting aloud about that issue. It is so unfair that I'm here doing this. Well, it seems like everybody else in the world is just relaxing and enjoying their holiday and having fun, including my husband, including my kids. And I've just got these piles of receipts to work through. Mountains of work on a holiday weekend. Okay, so after I've gone through that one round of tapping, I'm going to go over to number 5 and I'm going to note my SUDS rating. I'm going to update my subjective units of distress. So after my first round of tapping, I felt a little bit better. So I went ahead and I put a 6 in my SUDS score here. So I'm just going to go ahead and proceed and do another round of tapping. I hate this job. This is my very least favorite part of my job and my business. I really resent it. It doesn't seem fair that this should be my responsibility on a holiday weekend of all time. I mean, clearly I've procrastinated. I should have kept up with this all year long, and now I'm stuck having to do this chore. All right, so another round. So I've really, at this point in my tapping process, I'm not feeling all that much better. So I'm just going to go ahead and be honest about that and put another 6 here. So I'm going to try it again. So I procrastinated, and I hate this job, and I don't feel like I'm good at it. And while I sit here, I just feel like this sense of tightness in my chest. And like it's almost hard for me to breathe. Like there's this kind of insecurity. Like every other part of my business, I feel like I'm pretty good at. Not this one. Okay, so now, actually, I feel like I'm kind of going backwards as far as my SUDS is concerned. Now that I'm talking about this tightness in my chest and anxiety and all, it's actually, I'm going the wrong direction. My SUDS score is going up rather than down. And so this is always my cue that there's something going on that kind of falls outside of my original setup statement. And this is my cue that's just not making progress with my SUDS, or much less going backwards with my SUDS, is my cue that I need to go back and revisit the most pressing issue, see if I can refine it and get it more focused on the actual issue at hand. And so I'm going to do that by going to number 6 on the cheat sheet and noting down some of these kind of aspects that have arisen as I've tapped through the issue. One of the real powerful aspects of using the vent aloud technique, where you're just venting aloud about the issue as you're tapping on the points, is that sometimes the words that come out of your mouth are actually very insightful and help you to really kind of refine and hone in onto what the issue actually is. And so I'm going to note a few of these things here. I'm saying that I feel tight in my chest as I'm tapping, which is usually an indication of anxiety for me. I'm not good at this part of my job. I feel ashamed that I have procrastinated to this point at the end of the year. I'm actually even feeling sort of judged by this imaginary person, and I feel fearful of making mistakes. And so all of this, I'm kind of reflecting on these feelings, and then I realize, okay, I know what's going on here. Something that I hadn't really realized when I first sat down to work on tapping on this issue of my irritation and frustration and resentment about having to do this chore, is that the real issue at hand is that I'm feeling anxious and insecure and incompetent. And the thing that's coming from is that a few years ago, I had the misfortune of being completely randomly selected for a very thorough audit by the IRS. There was nothing wrong with my tax return. There was no indication that I had done anything wrong or dishonest, but I was just randomly selected for this very thorough audit. The IRS occasionally does these audits in order to refine the algorithms that they use in their computer system. And so I ended up having to spend nearly 6 months dealing with an IRS agent, giving him all of my records, all of my bank statements, all of my receipts, having him go through all of my financial record keeping on a line by line basis. And so it was like the part of my job where I feel the very least competent and therefore the very most insecure suddenly was placed under this spotlight and was subjected to this examination by these people that kind of had this guilty until proven innocence attitude toward my finances. And so in tapping on this issue, I realized that some of these feelings that were coming up for me had a lot to do with that audit and all of my feelings surrounding that. And so this cued me that I needed to go back and refine my most pressing issue and refine my setup statement and start tapping on that dimension of the issue rather than the dimension of resentment and frustration and bitterness. And so I'm going to go ahead and refine. So I'm going to look at my list again of the negative emotions. I'm going to see if I can hone in on ones that are a little more specific to this news setup statement. And so those are going to be feelings like feeling ashamed, feeling incompetent, feeling judged, feeling scared, as opposed to resentful and bitter. And then I'm going to create a new setup statement. So my new setup statement is, even though I'm not very good at this part of my job and I feel incompetent, ashamed, and judged, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. So I'm going to go now and start tapping on this setup statement and see if I get any further. Okay, so I'm going to say my new setup statement while tapping on my karate chop point 3 times. Even though I'm not very good at this part of my job and I feel incompetent, ashamed, and judged, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Even though I'm not very good at this part of my job and it makes me feel incompetent, ashamed, and judged, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Even though I'm not very good at this part of my job and it makes me feel incompetent, ashamed, and judged, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Every other part of my work, I feel so competent and solid and certain, but this is an area where I really don't feel that way. I'm constantly conscious that I might make a mistake, and that mistake might be subject to examination and judgment from another person, an expert, a IRS agent, which just makes me feel paralyzed and stuck, and as though I'd like to just do anything other than have to work on bookkeeping and accounting chores. Okay, so I'm going to go back and as I go through this, I'm going to re-rate my SUDS. So I'm starting to make some headway here. The first round that I did with that new setup statement, I got all the way from 7 to 4. So I'm just going to continue here for a little while. But for all that concern about judgment and all my sense that I'm not competent with this, I do have to remember that in the end of that audit, it turns out that I had done my work pretty well. The IRS agent, after all those months of combing through all my records, told me that I'd done a good job and that I was actually a lot more organized than most people are. Okay, so now with this next round of tapping, I've gotten all the way down to a 2 from 4. So maybe I'm not as incompetent as I thought I was. And in a sense, it makes me sort of angry that I was subject to all of those months of examination and doubting and sleepless nights. Because as it turns out, I was completely honest and there wasn't any problem with my tax return. And I was vindicated in the end. But I lost an awful lot of time and an awful lot of sleepless nights in the process. Okay, so now with that last round of tapping, I'm all the way down to a 1 and I'm feeling much more calm, much more centered. And so that's going to be my stopping place. I'm not going to tap anymore. And I'm going to take a look at the list of pleasant emotions that is included in the Tapping Quick Start document. And see if I can choose some of those pleasant emotions to describe the way that I'm feeling after I tapped through that issue, after I was able to get my SUDS score all the way from a 7 down to a 1. And so now I'm feeling this sense of compassion for myself. I'm actually feeling a sense of kind of righteous anger, which, although you might not normally think of that as a pleasant emotion, it really is a very powerful emotion. I'm feeling relieved because now I'm like clear about where my feelings were coming from. Even though, I still have that issue to deal with. The chore is still in front of me. I still have my feelings about the audit to work through. I'm relieved because at least I'm clear about why I was feeling distressed. I'm no longer dealing with this just amorphous sense of stressed out and not feeling good. I feel clear about why I was feeling that way. And I'm also feeling resolved. I'm feeling like, okay, now I understand what's going on and I can actually move forward with this chore in a focused way. And so that takes me to step 10 on the tapping cheat sheet, which is to jot down the notes about what I've learned and what action steps I'm going to take based on what I've learned. And so what I put here was, I'm still affected a lot more than I thought I was by feelings related to the audit. I need to take some time, though I'm not going to do it right now. I need to take some time to fully unpack and sort of tap through the feelings related to the audit. And because it almost feels, looking back, like sort of a trauma that I need to resolve. And so even after I work through that, even after those feelings are resolved, I should look at maybe hiring somebody who loves these kinds of bookkeeping chores and thrives in doing this kind of work, because I just don't. Maybe if I was to hire somebody who loves doing this kind of work, then that would enable me to stay, to focus my attention more in the areas of my business where I really am good at. They really light me up and make me feel good and take advantage of my best abilities. So probably doing bookkeeping chores myself is not the best use of my time resources. And then the other thing that I noticed as I was tapping through this situation is that I ought not feel resentful toward my husband, because I remembered that he actually had gotten up early that same day and done all of his chores. And so he was entitled to take the time to rest. My kids, on the other hand, however, I really do need to figure out a way to help them to be more consistent about pulling their weight around the house, so that way I don't end up feeling resentful and bitter about them. And so my last step, after I've really mined this whole situation for some data and some insight, is to again take a few deep breaths, reflect back on what I just did, and assign a final SUDS rating to the whole situation, which in this case is going to be a number 1. I've made huge progress here. I'm feeling much better. I have a lot more insight about what's actually going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this page. I'm going to 3-hole punch it. I'm going to put it in my binder, and I'm going to hold on to it as a point of reference for me to look back on and see the progress that I've made with tapping. I keep all of these cheat sheets, and they help me to remember just how powerful a tool tapping really is, and they help me to see the progress that I'm making toward having the life that I want to have, becoming the person that I want to be. So I hope that this illustration has been helpful to you. I hope that it gives you some inspiration to use the tapping cheat sheet in your own life to see if you might be able to untangle some situations in your own life and discover some insight that would be useful to you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for downloading the Tapping Quick Start guide from my website, and I hope you'll stick around, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and just stay tuned for future resources relating to, just practical solutions for becoming a happier and healthier person. Take care.